I am Jace, 32 years old, and I make indie video games for a living. My sister publicly mocked me in our family group chat, calling me an unemployed gamer who wastes his life. 2 weeks later, she desperately needed my professional expertise for a major lawsuit involving copyright infringement in the gaming industry. I refused unless she paid my consulting fee. She chose to fake her expertise instead. Now, her law license is suspended, and her reputation destroyed. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by family members who later needed your help. Sydney and I have had a tense relationship for most of our lives. She is 4 years younger than me, but somehow always managed to position herself as the golden child in our family. Our parents set the bar incredibly high for both of us from an early age. Dad is a neurosurgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, and Mom is a tenured professor of biochemistry at Harvard. Academic excellence wasn't just encouraged in our house, it was the baseline expectation. Growing up, Sydney embraced this pressure and thrived on it. She was a straight-A student from kindergarten through high school, captain of the debate team and president of the student council. Every achievement earned her beaming smiles and proud declarations from our parents. Sydney is going places they would tell anyone who would listen. I was different. I did well in school. Mostly A's and a few B's, but I was never the academic superstar that Sydney was. What I loved most were computers and video games. I spent hours learning to code, creating simple games in my bedroom, while Sydney was collecting academic awards. "Jace, why can't you be more like your sister?" became a common refrain in our house. Video games won't get you anywhere in life. Dad would lecture, "You need to focus on something practical, something that will secure your future." When it came time for college, Sydney went to Yale for pre-law following our parents' carefully mapped plan. I went to MIT for computer science, which my parents reluctantly accepted because at least it was a prestigious school. But when I announced during my junior year that I wanted to start my own indie game studio instead of pursuing a master's degree or taking a corporate job at Google or Microsoft, all hell broke loose. "You want to be a what a game maker?" "That is not a real career," Jace, Mom had shouted. "We did not pay for your education so you could play games all day." "It is not playing games, Mom. It is creating them. It is art programming, storytelling, and business, all rolled into one," I tried to explain. Dad was more blunt. "No. Son of mine is going to throw away a perfectly good education to make games. You will be living in our basement until you are 40. Sydney, of course, sided with our parents. "Just because you are good at playing games does not mean you should make a career out of it," she said, with that condescending tone she had perfected over the years. Some of us have real ambition. Despite their disapproval, I started my studio right after graduation. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee for the first 2 years, pouring everything into my first game. During family gatherings, Sydney would always find ways to highlight the contrast between us. "I just made junior associate at Harrington and Williams," she announced at Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. Youngest in the firm's history. Then she turned to me with a practiced, sympathetic smile. "How is your little game thing going, Jace? Made any money yet?" I would give brief, vague answers, because explaining the realities of game development to people who had already decided it wasn't a real job was exhausting. There was a time when Sydney and I were close, though. Before the academic pressure intensified, before the comparisons began. When I was 10 and she was 6, I taught her how to ride a bike in our driveway. I held the back of her seat running alongside as she pedaled, both of us laughing. When she fell and scraped her knee, I carried her inside on my back, promising her ice cream if she stopped crying. During middle school, I helped her with math homework, and she would bring me snacks while I worked on my early programming projects. But by high school, things had changed. The competition our parents fostered had driven a wedge between us, and Sydney had fully bought into the idea that traditional success was the only kind that mattered. By the time we were both adults, our relationship consisted mainly of obligatory birthday calls and occasionally being in the same family group chat. She was the successful lawyer with the corner office, and I was in her eyes just the guy who never grew up. The incident that set everything in motion happened during the pandemic. Like many families, we had started doing virtual gatherings since we couldn't meet in person. My parents, Sydney, our Aunt Carol, Uncle Greg, and 3 cousins were all part of a family WhatsApp group where we shared updates and occasionally scheduled video calls. It was April 5th, a Sunday, when we had one of those calls. Everyone was checking in, sharing how they were coping with lockdown measures. My cousin Amanda had just finished talking about her medical residency challenges when Mom asked Jace, "How are things with you? What have you been up to?" I was actually excited to share my news. After 5 years of building my studio, things were finally taking off in a big way. "Things are really good, actually," I said. "We just secured funding for our new game. It is the biggest project we have ever taken on, and we have hired 3 more developers. The prototype has been getting great feedback from playtesters." I was about to explain more when Sydney's unmistakable laugh cut through the call. "Still playing video games for a living, big brother," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Must be nice to have such a cushy setup during a pandemic while the rest of us are putting in 80-hour weeks doing real work." Before I could respond, she continued typing in the chat. "Career update from Jace Professional Unemployed Gamer. Still living the dream while the world burns." Several laugh emojis from our cousins followed her message. My Uncle Greg added, "At least someone in the family is having fun." "It is not playing games. It is creating them," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "My studio employs 7 people now, and we have 2 successful titles that are still generating revenue." Sure, Sydney replied dismissively. "I am sure your little hobby is very fulfilling. Meanwhile, I am handling a class action lawsuit that will affect thousands of people." Mom, sensing the tension, tried to intervene. "Now, Sydney, everyone's work is important in its own way. Jace has always been creative. Her attempt at peacekeeping only made things worse." The subtext was clear. Sydney did important work, while I had a cute little creative pursuit. "Thanks, Mom," I said flatly. "Well, if any of you need legal advice, you know who to call," Sydney said. "And if you need game recommendations, I guess Jace is your guy." More laughter followed. I sat there, my face burning with embarrassment and anger. These were the people who were supposed to support me, yet they were treating my career like it was a joke. "I have to go," I said abruptly. "Deadline to meet." It was a lie, but I couldn't sit there any longer. I logged off without waiting for goodbyes and immediately left the WhatsApp group. My phone started buzzing with private messages almost instantly, but I ignored them all. I turned it off and sat in the dark of my apartment, the familiar feeling of being the family disappointment washing over me. Later that evening, I checked my messages. Most were from Mom asking if I was okay and saying that Sydney didn't mean anything by it. Dad had sent a single message: "Don't be so sensitive." But there was also a message from my cousin Tyler. "Hey man, for what it's worth, I think what you do is really cool." Sydney was way out of line. "I actually played your last game, and it was awesome. Don't let them get to you." That small gesture of support meant more than Tyler would ever know. But the damage was done. The incident confirmed what I had suspected for years in my family's eyes. I would always be the underachiever, the one who took the easy way out, the unemployed gamer. What they didn't know was just how wrong they were. The truth about my career was far different from what my family believed. While they pictured me sitting in a dark room playing games all day, the reality was that I was running a successful business that was gaining recognition throughout the indie game industry. My studio, Quantum Pixel Games, wasn't just a hobby or a pipe dream. It was a legitimate company with a downtown office in Boston's Innovation District. The space wasn't huge, but it was modern and professional, with an open floor plan, ergonomic workstations, and a dedicated testing area where we would invite players to try our games in development. I had started with just myself and my college roommate Kyle, working out of my tiny apartment. Our first game, Echoes of Eternity, was a modest success that gave us enough capital to rent a small office and hire 2 more developers. Our second title, Quantum Drift, exceeded all expectations, selling over 700,000 copies in its first year and receiving glowing reviews from major gaming publications. By the time of that fateful family video call, I was leading a team of 7 full-time employees, 4 developers, 2 artists, and a sound designer. We were working on our most ambitious project yet, Nexus Horizon, an open-world adventure game that blended narrative storytelling with innovative gameplay mechanics. What my family also didn't know was that our little studio had won the Independent Game Festival's Excellence in Design Award the previous year. PC Gamer magazine had profiled us in their Indie Studios to Watch feature, calling our work boundary-pushing and refreshingly original in an industry often dominated by formulaic blockbusters. The financial reality would have shocked them, too. Our last fiscal year had brought in just over $3 million in revenue. After expenses and reinvestment in the company, I had taken home a salary of $250,000, likely more than Sydney made at her prestigious law firm, though I would never point that out to her. The morning after the family chat incident, I arrived at the office early. The team wouldn't be in for another hour, so I had the place to myself. I stood by the window looking out at the Boston skyline and thought about how little my family understood about what I had built. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle, who was now my business partner and creative director. Okay. You seemed off yesterday afternoon. I hadn't told the team about the family chat. I tried to keep my personal frustrations separate from work, but Kyle knew me too well. Family stuff, I replied. Nothing new. Let me guess. They still think you're just playing games in your pajamas all day. Something like that. Maybe you should send them the Forbes article from last month, or your tax returns. I laughed, despite myself. Kyle had been pushing me for years to be more transparent with my family about my success, but something always held me back. Pride, maybe, or perhaps a stubborn desire for them to recognize my achievements without me having to wave them in their faces. Later that morning, we held our daily stand-up meeting. The team gathered around the whiteboard as we discussed progress on Nexus Horizon. Emma, our lead artist, showed concept sketches for a new environment that left everyone impressed. Raj, our newest programmer, had solved a persistent bug in the physics engine that had been plaguing us for weeks. This was my real life. Leading a talented team, solving creative problems, building worlds that thousands of people would explore and enjoy. It was challenging, fulfilling work that required technical expertise, business acumen, and artistic vision. As the meeting concluded and everyone returned to their desks, I took a moment to appreciate what we had built together. The studio buzzed with creative energy as music from David's sound design station mixed with the clicking of keyboards and occasional bursts of laughter when someone discovered something amusing in the game. That afternoon, I received an email from our industry contact at Valve, the company behind Steam, the largest digital distribution platform for PC games. They wanted to feature Nexus Horizon in their upcoming summer showcase, a major opportunity that would put our game in front of millions of potential players. I called the team together to share the news, and we celebrated with impromptu pizza and beers after work. Sitting there watching my team excitedly discuss the showcase opportunity, I felt a pang of sadness that I couldn't share this moment with my family. They would never understand why it mattered. Or worse, they would somehow diminish it. To Quantum Pixel, Kyle said, raising his beer bottle for a toast. And to Jace, who had the vision to start this whole thing, when everyone said it was a dumb idea. Everyone clinked bottles, and I felt a warmth that pushed away the lingering sting of Sydney's mockery. These people. My team. the players who enjoyed our games, the industry peers who respected our work. They understood the value of what we were creating. Maybe that should be enough. But deep down, I still wished my family could see me. Really see me. For who I was and what I had accomplished. Not just as the kid who liked video games too much, but as an entrepreneur, a creator, a leader, someone who had taken a risk to pursue his passion and had succeeded against the odds. I had built my success on my own terms, focusing on innovative design and treating both my team and our player community with respect. We made games that we were proud of, games that meant something. I wasn't interested in chasing trends or exploiting players with manipulative monetization schemes that had become common in the industry. My philosophy was simple. Create experiences that respect players' intelligence, and treat my team with fairness and appreciation, and success would follow. So far, that approach had served us well both creatively and financially. If my family couldn't recognize that kind of success because it didn't come with a prestigious title or follow their prescribed path, that was their loss. Still, I never stopped hoping that someday they might understand. Little did I know that opportunity would come sooner than I expected, but not in the way I would have wished. Exactly 2 weeks after the family chat incident, I was reviewing some animation sequences for Nexus Horizon when my phone lit up with a notification. It was an email from Sydney. I almost ignored it, still smarting from her public mockery, but curiosity got the better of me. Subject: professional assistance required. Urgent. The formal tone immediately struck me as unusual. Sydney typically texted me with casual demands, disguised as requests. An email with this subject line meant she was approaching this as business, not family. Dear Jace, it began already raising my eyebrows at the uncharacteristic formality. I am reaching out regarding a case that my firm is currently handling. We are representing Visionary Games in a copyright infringement lawsuit against Nexus Gaming Limited. The case involves allegations that Nexus has copied proprietary game mechanics and design elements from my client's flagship product. While our legal team is well versed in intellectual property law, we require someone with specific knowledge of game development processes, industry standards, and technical specifications to strengthen our position. Given your experience in this field, your insights would be invaluable. The case is moving quickly, and we need this expertise within the next 3 days. If you could provide consultation on the following points, it would greatly assist our preparations. 1. Technical analysis of the alleged copied game mechanics. 2. Industry standards regarding derivative works in game design. 3. Expert opinion on whether the similarities constitute infringement. 4. Precedents for similar cases in the copied plank gaming industry. 5. Documentation of development processes that could prove or disprove intentional copying. Please let me know if you are able to assist. This is a high-profile case with significant implications. Sidney Reynolds Esquire Harrington and Williams Law Firm. I stared at the screen momentarily, stunned by the audacity. No acknowledgement of her behavior 2 weeks ago. No apology. Not even a hint of recognition that she was asking for help from someone she had publicly ridiculed for his profession. Before I could even formulate a response, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Did you get my email? This is time sensitive. The partner is breathing down my neck about this case. It could make or break my shot at junior partnership. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair, processing the situation. Sydney needed my expertise. The very expertise she had belittled. And she needed it urgently. 5 minutes later, another text. Jace, I know you are not in meetings all day like I am. Just call me when you get this. The presumption that I was just sitting around playing games rather than running a business grated on me. I stepped out of the office and called her. Finally, She answered without a hello. Did you read what I sent? I did, I replied coolly. So can you help? I need this by Friday at the latest. That is less than 3 days from now. I know. But you know all this gaming stuff, right? It should be straightforward for you. There it was again, the dismissive tone reducing years of professional experience to gaming stuff. Sydney, what you are asking for would require hours of analysis, research, and documentation. This is expert consultation work. But you are my brother, she said, as if that settled everything. Yes, the same brother you called an unemployed gamer 2 weeks ago. There was a pause on the line. For a moment I thought she might apologize. Are you really going to bring that up now? It was just a joke, Jace. Don't be so sensitive. I bit back a retort about how it hadn't seemed like a joke when everyone was laughing at my expense. Look, she continued, her voice taking on that persuasive tone. She probably used with juries. This case is huge. The damages could be in the tens of millions. There is a big bonus pool if we win, and I could really use your help. So, there it was, the real motivation. Not that she suddenly respected my expertise or regretted her mockery. She stood to make a lot of money if they won this case. What is your budget for expert consultation? I asked. Deciding to take a different approach. Budget. You are family. I thought you would just help. You want free expert consultation for a multi-million-dollar case. It is not like it would take you that long, she countered. And I would owe you one. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Sydney professional consultants in the gaming industry charge between $200 and $500 per hour for this kind of work. For a rush job with the scope you are describing, you would be looking at a minimum of 15 to 20 hours. That is several $1,000s of professional work you are asking for. That is ridiculous, she scoffed. You are not some hotshot expert, Jace. You make indie games. And just like that, any wavering I might have felt about my decision vanished. Good luck with your case, Sydney. I have to get back to work. Wait. Fine. Maybe the firm can allocate something for consultation fees. How much would you charge? It was tempting to quote her an outrageous figure out of spite. But I decided to be professional. My standard consulting rate is $350 per hour. Given the urgency and scope, I would estimate between 15 and 20 hours of work, so between $5,250 and $7,000. The line went silent for so long, I thought she had hung up. That is highway robbery for a family member, she finally said. No, that is the professional rate for the expertise you claim to need so badly. The same expertise you mocked 2 weeks ago. I cannot believe you would do this to me, she said, her voice rising. After everything I have done for you. I racked my brain trying to think of anything she had ever done for me professionally. Nothing came to mind. What exactly have you done for me, Sydney? I have always supported you. The lie was so blatant it was almost comical. I have to go. If you want to hire me professionally, send a formal request through my company email. Otherwise, I am sure you can find another expert. I hung up before she could respond, but my phone immediately lit up with a barrage of texts. You are going to regret this. I always knew you were petty. Mom and Dad will hear about this. Some brother you are. I turned off notifications from her and went back to work, though my concentration was shot for the rest of the day. True to her word, Sydney called our parents, who both reached out that evening. Dad was direct as always. Your sister needs your help. This is not the time for sibling rivalry. Mom tried a gentler approach. Honey, I know Sydney can be difficult, but this is important for her career. Can't you find it in your heart to help her? Neither of them questioned whether Sydney should have apologized for her behavior or offered to compensate me for professional services. In their eyes, I was still the younger brother who should be grateful that his successful sister even wanted his input. I held firm, explaining that what Sydney was asking for was substantial professional work that would take time away from my own business obligations. Neither of them seemed to fully grasp this concept, but eventually they stopped pushing. That night I received one final email from Sydney. "Fine. Do not help. I will figure it out myself. But remember this moment the next time you need anything from me." Little did she know how that decision would come back to haunt her. The morning after Sydney's request, I found myself still mulling over the situation. Had I made the right call? As much as she had hurt and disrespected me, she was still my sister. Was I letting pride get in the way of family? I decided to talk it through with Kyle during our morning coffee run. We walked to the little cafe around the corner from our office, and I filled him in on Sydney's request and my refusal. "Let me get this straight," Kyle said as we waited for our orders. "Your sister publicly mocks your career. Then, 2 weeks later, asks you to provide thousands of dollars worth of expert consultation for free. Gets mad when you quote her, your professional rate, and now your parents are guilting you about it." When he put it that way, it sounded even more absurd than it had in my head. "Yeah, that about sums it up. And you are second-guessing yourself because—" I sighed. "Because she is my sister. Because maybe I should be the bigger person." Kyle shook his head. "Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Would she do the same for you if the situations were reversed?" We both knew the answer to that. Sydney had never gone out of her way to help me with anything related to my career. When I had asked her for legal advice on setting up my company years ago, she had directed me to a junior colleague who had barely answered my questions. "Look," Kyle continued as we walked back to the office with our coffees, "you offered her a fair professional rate. You didn't even charge her a rush fee, which you absolutely could have. If she values your expertise, she should be willing to pay for it like anyone else." Back at the office, I decided to research what other gaming industry consultants charged for similar expert testimony and analysis. The rates ranged from $200 to over $600 per hour, with most experienced consultants in the $300 to $400 range. My quote had been perfectly reasonable. I also spoke with Emma, who had worked at a larger studio before joining us. She had been involved in a copyright case there. "Trust me," she said, "what your sister is asking for is a ton of work." For our case, the expert consultant spent almost 30 hours preparing materials, and that wasn't even on a rush timeline. You were right to quote her a professional rate. By lunchtime, I felt more confident in my decision. This wasn't about getting back at Sydney for her mockery. It was about setting appropriate boundaries and valuing my own expertise. I drafted a formal email response to Sydney. "Dear Sydney, after careful consideration, I am standing by my decision regarding the consultation work you requested. What you are asking for represents significant professional expertise and time commitment that would take me away from my current project deadlines. As I mentioned, my standard consulting rate for this type of work is $350 per hour. If your firm wishes to engage my services professionally, I would be happy to provide a formal quote and contract. The disrespect you showed toward my career during our family call factors into this decision. Professional respect is a two-way street. If you expect me to provide expert services acknowledging the value and legitimacy of my professional experience would be a starting point. I wish you success with your case and hope you find a consultant who meets your needs and budget. Best regards, Jace Reynolds, CEO, Quantum Pixel Games." I read it over twice to make sure it was professional and clear, then hit send. I didn't expect a positive response, but I felt it was important to formally close the door on this request. Sure enough, within the hour, my phone rang with a call from Sydney. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was scathing. How dare you send me such a condescending email? You know what, Jace, I don't need your help. I will find a real expert, someone who actually has credentials people respect, not some indie game maker working out of his apartment. This was your chance to finally contribute something meaningful, and you blew it. Don't come crying to me when your little game studio fails and you need legal help. Her assumption that I still worked out of my apartment showed just how little interest she had ever taken in my actual career. She had no idea that I ran a successful company with a real office and employees. The barrage didn't stop there. That evening, Dad called his voice tight, with disappointment. Your mother and I raised you to help family when they need it, he said without preamble. I don't understand why you are being so difficult about this. Dad, would you perform brain surgery for free on a friend's relative just because they asked? I countered. That is different, and you know it, he replied. How you spent years developing your expertise, and so have I. Sydney wants me to provide expert analysis for a major lawsuit. That is, professional work. She is trying to advance her career, Jace. This case is important to her. And my time and expertise are important to me, I insisted. I offered to do the work at a fair professional rate. She refused. The conversation went in circles from there with Dad, unable or unwilling to see my perspective. Mom called next, taking a more emotional approach about family. Sticking together, but the underlying message was the same. I should set aside my professional boundaries to help Sydney advance her career regardless of how she had treated me. By the end of the day, I felt emotionally drained but still certain I had made the right decision. Sydney had crossed a line with her mockery and then crossed another by expecting free expert consultation. If I gave in, I would only be reinforcing the family dynamic that had belittled my career for years. As I locked up the office that evening, I wondered how Sydney would handle her case without my help. Knowing her determination, she would find a way forward. I just hoped for her client's sake that she would find a qualified expert, rather than trying to fake her way through the technical aspects. Unfortunately, as I would discover a few weeks later, hope wasn't enough to overcome Sydney's pride and ambition. 3 weeks passed with no further contact from Sydney or my parents. I threw myself into work, and development on Nexus Horizon was progressing well. We were approaching a major milestone, preparing a vertical slice demo for potential publishers, and the entire team was working at full capacity. On a Wednesday afternoon, I was reviewing some character models when an email notification popped up on my screen. The sender name made me sit up straight. Jonathan Parker, Esquire. I didn't recognize the name, but the Esquire suffix suggested another lawyer. With some trepidation, I opened the email. Dear Mr. Reynolds, my name is Jonathan Parker, and I represent Nexus Gaming Limited in the recent copyright infringement case brought against us by Visionary Games, represented by Harrington and Williams, specifically by attorney Sydney Reynolds. I am contacting you because your name has come up in our investigation following the case's dismissal. We have reason to believe that Miss Reynolds, whom I understand is your sister, may have misrepresented certain expert testimony regarding game development processes and industry standards. We have discovered documents submitted to the court that purport to contain expert analysis of the technical similarities between our client's game and Visionary's product. These documents listed you as a consultant, though they were not signed by you personally. Given the serious nature of this situation, I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you at your earliest convenience. To clarify whether you provided this consultation or authorized the use of your name in these legal proceedings, please contact me at your earliest convenience. This matter is being investigated by both our firm and the State Bar Association. Regards, Jonathan Parker, Esquire. Senior Partner Parker, Mitchell and Associates. My blood ran cold as I read the email. Sydney had listed me as a consultant, used my name on court documents without my knowledge or consent. This was far worse than I had imagined. I immediately called the number provided in the email. Jonathan Parker answered on the second ring. "Mr. Parker, this is Jace Reynolds returning your call about the Visionary Games case." "Mr. Reynolds, thank you for getting back to me so quickly," he replied, his tone professional but grave. "I take it from your prompt response that you were unaware of the use of your name in this case." "Completely unaware," I confirmed. "My sister did approach me for consultation, but I declined when we couldn't agree on terms. I absolutely did not provide any analysis or authorize the use of my name." There was a pause on the line. "I see. This is extremely serious, Mr. Reynolds." The documents in question contained technical analysis that our experts have identified as fundamentally flawed and misleading. The case was dismissed when our team challenged the credentials of the supposed expert who provided them, you, and Miss Reynolds was unable to produce any record of your actual involvement. My mind was reeling. What exactly did these documents claim? They purported to analyze the code similarities between the two games in question, providing opinions on whether certain features were copied or independently developed. They also included statements about industry standards that our experts identified as inaccurate or misleading. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. "Mr. Parker, I never saw these documents, never wrote them, and never authorized my name to be used on them. I'm a game developer, but I'm not a forensic code analyst, and I would never put my name on analysis I hadn't personally conducted. Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement to that effect?" "The Bar Association is investigating this as a potential ethics violation." "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "I can also provide records of my communication with Sydney, showing that I declined to consult on this case." After discussing the details of how to provide my statement, I hung up and sat in stunned silence. Sydney had not only forged expert testimony but had done so in my name. The implications were staggering. Later that afternoon, I received another email, this time from the State Bar Association, requesting my cooperation in their investigation of Sydney's conduct. They explained that Visionary Games had lost the case and potentially millions in damages due to the discredited expert testimony. The company was now considering a malpractice suit against Harrington and Williams. The next day, I provided sworn statements to both Jonathan Parker's firm and the Bar Association, including copies of all communications with Sydney about the case. I felt sick doing it, knowing the potential consequences for my sister. But I couldn't lie to protect her from her own unethical actions. A week later, the story broke on a legal news website. Junior attorney faces ethics investigation over allegedly falsified expert testimony. The article didn't name Sydney directly, but it mentioned a junior associate at Harrington and Williams who had allegedly submitted falsified expert analysis in a major copyright case. The firm had issued a statement saying they were cooperating fully with the Bar Association's investigation and that the attorney in question had been placed on administrative leave. 2 days after that, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a reporter from a legal industry publication. "Mr. Reynolds, my name is David Chen from Legal Weekly. I'm working on a story about the ethics investigation involving Sydney Reynolds. I understand you're her brother and the person whose expertise she allegedly misrepresented. Would you be willing to comment on the situation?" I declined to comment, but the call confirmed what I had suspected: this was becoming a very public scandal. Sydney's career was in serious jeopardy. That evening, my parents called. Their tone had changed dramatically from our last conversation. "Did you know about this?" Dad demanded, his voice shaking with anger. But for once, it wasn't directed at me. "Did you know what Sydney did?" I just found out when the other law firm contacted me, I answered honestly. She used your name on false documents, Mom said, sounding shell-shocked. How could she do something so unethical? The irony wasn't lost on me that they were now outraged on my behalf when they had been pressuring me to help Sydney just weeks before. But I took no pleasure in their dismay or in Sydney's predicament. I don't know, Mom. I guess she was desperate to win the case. The Bar Association has scheduled a disciplinary hearing, Dad said. Her whole career could be over before it really began. As the magnitude of the situation sank in, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at Sydney for what she had done, guilt for having refused to help her, though I reminded myself that this in no way justified her actions, and sadness for the UMA, damage to our already strained relationship. 2 weeks later, I received formal notification that I would need to testify at Sydney's disciplinary hearing. The date was set for the following month. I couldn't help but wonder how different things might have been if Sydney had simply respected my profession enough to either pay my consulting fee or find another legitimate expert. Instead, her dismissal of my career had led her to assume she could fake the expertise herself, with disastrous consequences. The day before the hearing, a detailed article appeared in the Boston Legal Review, outlining the full scope of the allegations against Sydney. According to the article, the Bar Association's investigation had uncovered not only the falsified expert testimony, but also evidence that Sydney had altered dates on certain documents to meet filing deadlines and had misrepresented communications with the opposing counsel. The hearing itself was as grim as I had expected. Sydney sat with her own attorney, looking pale and defeated as the evidence was presented. When I testified about our communications regarding the case, she couldn't meet my eyes. 2 days later, the Bar Association announced its decision. Sydney's law license would be suspended for 18 months, and she would need to complete an ethics course before being considered for reinstatement. Harrington and Williams issued a terse statement the same day, announcing that Sydney's employment had been terminated. The family that had once celebrated Sydney's every achievement now had to grapple with her disgrace, and I, the brother she had mocked as an unemployed gamer, had been unwittingly pulled into the center of her professional downfall. In the aftermath of Sydney's license suspension, our family fell into a stunned silence. The golden child had fallen, and no one quite knew how to process it. My parents, who had always been Sydney's most vocal champions, were devastated. Mom called me in tears the day after the Bar Association's decision. She is moving back home, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. The firm. They fired her immediately. She cannot even afford her apartment without her salary. I felt no satisfaction in Sydney's downfall. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and hearing about her struggles only made me sad. How is she doing? I asked. Not well, Mom admitted. She barely leaves her room. Your father is worried she might be depressed. It had been nearly 2 months since the disciplinary hearing, and I hadn't spoken directly to Sydney. Part of me wanted to reach out, but another part still stung from her betrayal. Not just the mockery, but the fact that she had used my name on falsified documents, potentially damaging my own professional reputation. After another week of thought, I finally sent Sydney a text. If you want to talk, I'm here. 3 days passed with no response. Then on Sunday morning I received a reply. Coffee at Riverside Cafe tomorrow, 10 a.m. Riverside Cafe was halfway between my office and our parents' home in the suburbs. Neutral territory. I'll be there, I responded. The next morning I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early and found a quiet table in the corner. Sydney walked in precisely at 10, looking nothing like the confident, polished lawyer I was accustomed to seeing. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, and her usual designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. Hey, she said softly as she sat down across from me. Hey, I replied. How are you holding up? She gave a small, humorless laugh. About as well as you would expect for someone who just destroyed their entire career. She paused, then added, I ordered at the counter. Hope you don't mind. We sat in awkward silence until our coffees arrived. Sydney wrapped her hands around the mug, as if seeking warmth, then finally looked me in the eye. I owe you an apology, she said. Several, actually. I waited, giving her space to continue. I'm sorry for mocking your career. I'm sorry for asking you to work for free. And her voice cracked slightly. I'm incredibly sorry for using your name on those documents. That was unforgivable. Why did you do it? I asked the question that had been haunting me for months. Sydney stared into her coffee. The partner in charge of the case was pressuring me for the expert analysis. When you refused to help, I thought I could figure it out myself. I read some articles online about game development and coding, and I thought I could fake it well enough. And you used my name because I needed credibility, she admitted. And because I was angry at you for refusing to help, I thought, fine, if he won't help willingly, I'll just use his name anyway. It was petty and unprofessional and illegal. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. I never thought I'd be the kind of lawyer who falsified evidence. But I was so desperate to prove myself to win that case. The rawness of her confession disarmed me. This was a Sydney I had rarely seen. Vulnerable, admitting fault, stripped of her usual armor of accomplishments and superiority. The thing is, she continued, I've been thinking a lot about why I felt I needed to win at any cost. And it all comes back to how I've defined myself my whole life. I was the achiever, the successful one. That was my identity. When that case started to go south, I panicked because I couldn't face failing. I nodded slowly. I understand that pressure more than you might think. I know you do, she said, surprising me. And that's what makes what I did to you even worse. I dismissed your career because it didn't fit my narrow definition of success when in reality. She trailed off. When in reality what? When in reality you've been more successful than me all along, she finished. Mom and Dad told me about your company, about the awards, about the games you've created. They looked you up after everything happened. They were impressed. Proud even. I felt a complicated surge of emotions. Validation certainly, but also sadness that it had taken Sydney's disgrace for my parents to finally recognize my achievements. I was so focused on titles and prestige that I couldn't see what real success looks like. Sydney continued, You built something you believe in. You did it your way, on your own terms. And I cut corners and violated my ethics because I was chasing a definition of success that wasn't even mine. We talked for over 2 hours that morning. Really talked in a way we hadn't since we were children. Sydney told me about the crushing pressure she had put on herself, the constant fear of not living up to expectations. I shared my own struggles with feeling like the family disappointment, despite my professional accomplishments. What will you do now? I finally asked, as our conversation wound down. Honestly, I don't know, she admitted. 18 months is a long time to be suspended. And even when I get my license back, who would hire me? Do you still want to practice law? She considered this. I think I do, but differently. Not at a cutthroat firm where winning is the only thing that matters. Maybe something more aligned with my values. What are your values? I asked, realizing I didn't actually know. That's what I'm trying to figure out, she said with a small smile. As we were preparing to leave, I made a decision. Sydney, I'm not offering you a job. That would be nepotism, and honestly, you don't have the skills we need. But if you want to learn about the gaming industry, really learn, I could point you in the right direction. Resources, online courses, industry events. She looked surprised. Why would you do that for me after everything? Because you're my sister, I said simply. And because everyone deserves a second chance to find their path. Over the next few months, Sydney began a slow but genuine transformation. She took online courses in game design and business ethics. She started a blog documenting her journey of professional redemption. And gradually, she rebuilt her relationship with me and with our parents, who were finally beginning to reassess their narrow view of success. 6 months after our coffee shop meeting, Quantum Pixel Games released Nexus Horizon to critical acclaim and commercial success. We held a launch party at a trendy venue in downtown Boston, and I invited Sydney. To my surprise, she not only came, but brought our parents as well. Dad awkwardly approached me during the event, clutching a drink and looking around at the industry professionals and gaming journalists mingling in the room. "This is quite impressive, Jace." He said, a note of genuine respect in his voice. "For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I think I may have misjudged your career path." Mom was more direct. "We're proud of you, honey," she said, hugging me tightly. "We should have said that a long time ago." Later that evening, Sydney found me near the demo stations where attendees were playing our new game. "Congratulations," she said, and I could tell she meant it. "This is amazing. You built all this." "Thank you," I replied. "How are things going with you?" "Better," she said. "I've been volunteering at a legal aid clinic. It doesn't pay, but it feels good to help people who really need it. And I've been learning a lot about game development. It's fascinating stuff. Way more complex than I ever gave it credit for. Maybe when you get your license back, you could specialize in gaming industry law," I suggested. "There's a real need for attorneys who actually understand the technical aspects." Her eyes lit up at the idea. "That would be... Actually, that could be perfect." As the party wound down, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. Sydney's mockery, her desperate request, my refusal, her ethical breach, and finally her humbling and redemption. Through it all, we had both learned valuable lessons about success, respect, and integrity. In the end, Sydney's suspension wasn't just a punishment. It was an opportunity for her to reassess what truly mattered. And my standing firm on my professional boundaries wasn't just about pride. It was about establishing the respect I had earned, but never demanded from my family. Real success isn't measured by titles or prestige. It's built on passion, integrity, and doing work you believe in. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to recognize our achievements, but that doesn't diminish their value. And sometimes the hardest falls lead to the most important insights. If you've ever been underestimated by your family or had your achievements dismissed, I hope this story resonates with you. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions. Stand firm in your value, maintain your boundaries, and success, real success, will follow. What do you think about how I handled the situation with my sister? Would you have helped her despite her mockery, or stood your ground as I did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story connected with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, success on your own terms is the only kind that truly matters.